All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to GDC after lunch. This is when, if you're anything like me, you're in a little bit of a torpor from eating, and I'm going to try to wake you up a little bit with a super exciting topic. It's actually something I've been very excited about for years. Before I dive into it, quick show of hands. How many of you currently are managing people? Oh, excellent. How many of you are managing managers? Excellent, good. How many of you are hoping to manage someday? All right, all right. All right, that helps me orient where we're going with this. Yesterday, Oliver Frensky from Double Fine did a great talk on, so now you're a lead, what do you do? And that was a great practical discussion of you've just been promoted, how are you going to handle that? In some respect, our talks probably should have been reversed, because I'm talking about the other side of the problem, not you've been promoted, but the other problem of how do we promote people? How do we understand who's best in line? So we're going to be talking about today how we find leaders within our own organization. So a moment about me. My name is Joshua Howard, and I currently teach at the University of Texas at Austin with Warren Spector, a program called the Denia Sam's Gaming Academy. We're the first of its kind program to focus not on the development of video games, but on leadership and management in the video game industry. It's an intensive 9-month program where we bring together 20 students this year from all over the world, and while we drill them on leadership and management and production and a variety of other business and management topics, they're also running a studio with the idea of shipping a game. It's awesome, but it's also something that I don't expect most people to be able to do, to take 9 months out of their career to come do this with Warren Spector. So instead, most of us have to find ways on the job of ensuring that we can create the next generation of leaders. So that's what we're going to do today. But plug for the DSGA. If you or any of your people are interested, check us out. We start accepting applications somewhere in the January, February timeframe for next year. Very exclusive. So when people ask me, what do? I say, first off, I've been in software about 20 years, most of the last half of that in video gaming of one sort or another. I've taken this little diversion into teaching because it's a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, that is leadership and management. When they ask what I do, I say, well, I've run studios, I've been an EP multiple times, I've led P&Ls, I've led organizations of 15, 20, up to several hundred. But what I really do is I design. The games I design, you probably haven't heard of. In fact, most of the people who played those games probably haven't heard of them. Because the games I design result in a team building a game. I build games that help groups of people come together and do the best they can to publish a product. Now that's what this industry talks about game design most of the time, is the nuts and bolts of the final product. But many of you in this room understand that the nuts and bolts of the final product are only part of the equation. The other part of the equation is all of what we do to help those people do that well. I've spoken many times about how management is very similar to game design, and when you take a game design hat to management topics, you find all sorts of interesting things. Turns out it's not as scary as you might imagine. Today we're going to talk about the problem of, I'm growing, I have an organization, and at some point I need more leads. You start potentially, if you're lucky, with a small team, and you're successful, so that team is getting bigger. At some point, you're big enough that a flat structure, hey, we're all buddies, we all work with each other, isn't going to get to work anymore. So you're going to need some leads. Where do you find those leads? How do you grow them? And as the organization gets bigger and bigger, how do you find even more leads? More growth equals more leads. How do we find leads in a reliable way? How do we help grow leads internally, assuming that you're an organization that doesn't have the huge corporate resources of an internal management development program? How do you go about doing it? So whether or not you're managing today or you want to be a manager, I'm going to discuss a variety of systems and approaches and tools that you can use to help find, identify, and then culture, grow the people who could be your future leadership. First off, we get to say this. Hopefully for most of this audience, it's well understood. Not to dismiss how hard it is to hire good talent, but in many respects, hiring for the hard skills we need in the video games industry is pretty well understood. You ask a programmer to code, and it does or does not do what you need it to do. You watch an artist art, and it does or does not meet the expectations you have. The variety of disciplines we bring together in video game development is pretty incredible, and the hard skills can be taught. Turns out, though, that the soft skills are much more difficult. The soft skills don't necessarily get taught in schools. The soft skills, communication, interpersonal relationships, avoiding or dealing with conflict, all of these are somewhat difficult. And though it's obvious to say, it turns out that just because you have good hard skills doesn't mean you might have good soft skills. And yet we make this mistake constantly. One of the things that Oliver did in his talk that I really liked, he asked how many people had been promoted because they were the best of their thing. And a lot of people, that's why they got into leadership. I was the best programmer on the team, so they asked me to be the lead. Why does it follow that because I'm great at this hard skill, I'm going to be good at this other soft skill? It doesn't. So the problem of, we know we need more leaders, where do we get them from? Developing hard skills is easy. Comparatively, soft skills can be very difficult. I contend we can grow leaders intentionally. Whether you're a leader to be, or you're currently in a position where you're going to be responsible for growing somebody to take your job when you get promoted, this doesn't have to be happenstance. Let's talk about how. You have within you the tools and the challenges and the opportunities to do everything I'm going to be describing today. There's nothing here that is special or particularly out of bounds. The things that I'll be describing today is the culmination of what I've been doing off and on in various forms for many different years. I've always believed, as my first job taught me, that the best way to get promoted is to work yourself out of a job. The faster I can get somebody to replace me is the sooner I can replace my boss. So this is something I've been thinking about for a long time. It's not necessarily the only way, nor is it the way that has to work exactly for you. The intent is to share an approach, to share a set of tools that you can then adjust, modify as appropriate for your organization or your culture. So today we're going to talk about how you identify the very best leads, the people to spend your time and energy on. Not that you don't have a wonderful team, but spread your focus too thin, you're not going to get anywhere. How do we identify who to really impress upon? We're going to talk about specific tools that we're going to use to do this. We're going to talk about then, once you've identified a group of people, ways that we're going to grow them on the job. We're going to talk about how important mentoring is to that process. And then finally, how, once you've done all this, you're well set up to do formal succession planning. Show of hands. How many people here have ever done formal succession planning? Yeah. The fact we got any hands is awesome. This industry is moving, but we still have a ways to go. I've always said that a lot of management is like game design, so if I were speaking as a game designer, I would now tell you that we want to make a game where we're going to teach our players some new things, and then we're going to pick the players who use those new skills the best and pass some trait tests. Right? Got to do some stat checks. And then those players are going to earn the right to attempt special quests. And to join them on these quests, we'll partner them with champions who can help them on their journey. And then at the very end, only the most worthy will have an opportunity to advance, to become wizards. I use that word. Anybody remember the old text days? You kids and your graphical MMOs. Long time ago when MMOs or MUDs were simply things we did with text over telnet terminals. You'd build a game and you'd invite people to play. And some of your players might go beyond the system and you'd invite them to become wizards and help you actually in crafting the game. It was an exciting time, mostly lost in the age of great graphics these days, but that's sort of the same approach. Okay, so in leadership speak, what are we doing? We're going to talk about a bunch of tools that we're going to seed to our entire team. We're going to see which of the people in the organization are most ready to use those tools. Who really embraces it? Who understands these tools? Who embodies the core virtues that I'll discuss in a moment? That being our leadership pool, we will then give them on-the-job training, which is another couple of tools, as well as providing them mentors to achieve the challenges that we've asked them to do as a growth mechanism. And then out of that, you'll be able to identify which candidates are most appropriate for your future leadership needs, which is your succession planning. Phase one, how do we identify the candidates? Maybe you've got a really small team and it's not such a big issue. But when you're managing a very large organization, you can't necessarily put your energy and time into helping every single person become a future leader at the same degree. I'm a big believer, for better or worse, in an achievement culture where those that are really the high achievers get the attention they need. So we're going to identify, using some mechanisms, the people who are most likely to be your future leaders. That's our phase one. How are we going to do this? Well, first off, I want you to introduce several tools to your team. And this is what I mean. We're going to talk about how important it is to ask for help. We're going to talk about something called say it, do it, hold yourself accountable. And we're going to talk about something called the MRI, the most respectful interpretation. For each of these, I'll take a moment to define them, and then I'll show you how you need to capture these, embody these, and model these, and how we're going to use that moving forward. Our first tool. How can asking for help be a tool? Actually, turns out this is not like super magic. Multiple peoples over many years have identified and understood the power of asking for help. Great people ask for help, and they don't even really think second about it. The way you unlock greatness in your team and your organization is to understand how important it is to ask for help. If you're interested in the core protocols, check them out. There's a link at the end of the slide deck. It is literally step-by-step guidelines on how you can help any team get to greatness. Written for software developers, which means not a lot of mumbo-jumbo, but lots and lots of clarity. Asking for help is one of the core protocols. Asking for help. Maybe we talk about people who don't ask for help for a moment. People who don't ask for help tend to think they're smarter than everyone else. And while you may be smarter than me, you are not smarter than all of us. Actually, many of you are smarter than me. I've come to accept that. But I've never worked with anybody who is smarter than the entirety of the team that I can put together. Not asking for help implies you never think you're wrong. Not asking for help says you have nothing to learn. Okay, cut to the chase. People who don't ask for help typically end up being cowardly, scared, or delusional. This is not to say that not asking for help is a bad thing. Yeah, it is. Not asking for help is a bad thing. Embody the value of asking for help. Be strong enough to demonstrate that asking for help is a strength. Model it in your team. Asking for help is the first key tool. If somebody can't ask for help, I'm telling you, they are not good fodder for what's going to be future leadership. Let's keep going. Second tool. Something I call say it, do it, and hold yourself accountable. It's sort of a magic thing. The idea that we work in an industry where most of us have an autonomy level to decide really what we're doing day to day. I mean, there are a lot of jobs, a lot of good jobs, that don't give us that kind of freedom. But in this industry, we do. Say it, do it, hold yourself accountable is more than just status reporting. It's sort of a mental frame of mind that says, I want to broadcast my state. I want to make sure that the people around me understand what I'm doing. Around me. Not just up, not just down, but also out to the side. It's about saying what you're going to do ahead of time. This week, I need to do X, Y, and Z. Last week, I did A, B, and C. I meant to do D, but I didn't get it done for the following reason. Because once you've said a thing, you've now got to go through, carry through, and do it to the best of your ability. That doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean you're necessarily not going to get it wrong a little bit. But it does mean that you're going to hold yourself accountable regardless. At the end, you're going to say, I said a thing, I did a thing, and here's how that thing went, warts and all. No surprises is a big deal for me. Whether I'm running a studio or I'm a teacher, I want no surprises. Surprises are bad for our business. Surprises to your customer, that might be exciting. But inside the studio, we want no surprises. Hopefully you understand that. Say it, do it, hold yourself accountable is a framework that ensures great transparency and no surprises. Get into the habit of articulating what you're going to do before you do it. That's broadcasting state. And then doing it as well as you can, which means organizing your time and the rest of your functions to get there. And then holding yourself accountable is not about slinking away at the end of the day when you got it wrong or when you didn't get it accomplished. It's about being the first one to stand up and say, I said I'd do it, I tried to do it, but I didn't. Because that level of transparency is a fantastic thing for a team and as a leader. It's okay to have explanations, we just don't want excuses. I couldn't get this thing done because I was sick. Hey, we all have sick days. I couldn't get this thing done because Johnny wasn't here and he owed me a thing and a blah, blah, blah. That sounds more like an excuse. You just didn't think it through enough. Say it, do it, hold yourself accountable. It's more than just about thinking in status. It's about having an approach to transparency, which is very powerful. Think about using this at various intervals, whatever interval is appropriate. Some small teams might do it daily, which is kind of what our daily stand-ups are if you're agile. Some weekly. Sometimes I've used it where it's on a sprintly basis. One person decides it, and then a whole team does what the team's going to do. It got to the point where my studios are doing this on a sprintly basis for both my customers, my management, and my peers. They know what my studio is going to accomplish because we are saying it. They see that we're doing it, and they see us holding ourselves accountable even when we screw up. The next tool, the most respectful interpretation, called the MRI. It's a powerful concept for interpersonal communication. It says that as the listener, you get to decide how to react. Maybe you've got kids. Maybe you've heard somebody say, well, he made me do it, right? You know, they called me a dummy and they made me hit them. No, they didn't. Grow up. And yet, a lot of times, I imagine in your studios, you see interpersonal relationships break down because somebody feels like somebody made them do a thing. You were mean to me, so I'm mean back to you, and now any hope of our product productivity moving forward is lost. We're no longer talking about the business. We're no longer talking about the hard issues of building our product. Now we're into this bickering. The MRI is a tool to help you short-circuit that. The MRI says, find the most respectful interpretation. Find the very best way to interpret what they said. Recognizing that it's very human to assume the worst. It's very human to believe that you need to be defensive in the eyes of a hard question, in the eyes of a sarcastic comment, in response to a sideways glance that looks like a lack of respect. You can choose to read it as an attack, but you can also choose not to. When you practice the MRI, you're doing your best to find the most positive thing in everything being said to you. And if you can't, you called me a moron, and I'm having a hard time finding a way to interpret that respectfully. So I'm going to ask you a question. I'm not going to fire back and call you a moron back or worse. I'm going to say, you seem really upset, and I'm not sure I understand why, so that we can move our business forward and not merely cycle this personal conversation into a place that doesn't help. Help me understand. Ask a question. It's a powerful concept when you realize that while you control what you say, I have no control of what comes out of your mouth. But neither do you have any control of my reaction. And if I give you that control, I'm a fool. I need to practice enough self-control that I'm in charge of how I react. And I will choose to react respectfully. So it's a powerful tool. Use it, show it, teach it to other people. So we've talked 3 quick tools. Here's how we're gonna talk about them to the team. Well, first off, and probably most importantly, model these behaviors yourself. And if these 3 tools don't quite do it for you, find others that are appropriately beneficial towards setting good, strong examples of what you believe leadership should be. These are tools I've used for years. I find them very successful. Modeling behavior is the #1 way you're going to ensure that your team understands, not just that you think it's important, but that you believe in it. When you can be transparent enough to say when you screwed up, when you can be strong enough to not respond to that attack and instead find a respectful interpretation, when they see you being strong enough to say, hey, I'm stuck, anybody got any help? That's powerful. But you can also teach it to them. I tend to believe that teaching can also be valuable. You're going to teach it to them and you're going to say, I'm going to hold you accountable. I wouldn't do all of them at once, but one at a time in a team meeting. You're saying, hey, I had this great talk at GDC, plug. And he talked about this thing called the MRI, and I want to give it a try. So let me talk to you all about the MRI, and let's see if we can use this and see if it matters, see if it helps. And then hold them accountable for using it. I want to see you try this in your day-to-day because I think it might help us. The best way to do this is to both model it and to talk about it in a more explicit way. And as hard as it might be to fully live up to these expectations, recognize that true leadership is when you say, do as I do and do as I say. And everywhere that our behavior doesn't match our words, we have leadership growth to do ourselves. So, introduce the ideas to your team formally, model the behavior. Some other thoughts on how you might teach these. I like to present something like this in a more abstract form. Because even though some people on your team might glaze over at the abstraction, there are going to be likely some people on your team who need a framework that they can plug into and they can understand. Unstructured knowledge is sort of noisy. Structuring knowledge by providing a framework, a name, a concept, that can help. Maybe not everybody, but enough people. But even the people who aren't necessarily helped, you've now created a reminder. You've started a thread running in the back of their brains. There's now a little demon that's operating that's saying, MRI, MRI. That was kind of dumb. MRI. But they're thinking about it. Because then, when you go the next step, which is to find in-moment opportunities, they recall. Hey, you guys are arguing. Try the MRI on this one. Oh, yeah. Okay. How did that work? How did that feel? Did that help? In-moment opportunities are the way to take the theoretical knowledge and turn it into actual practical knowledge. A huge amount of what we do at the DSGA. Imagine we're lecturing every morning for an hour and a half, teaching theories and concepts, which the students would easily forget when they jump right into their studio to run their game. So our job as faculty is to sit there and to watch them and observe them. And when we see people beginning to have a little bit of a disconnect, we get to say, time out. Do you remember that lecture we had last week? We talked about this particular conflict negotiation tactic. Give it a try. Because if you don't try it, you can never understand if it's going to work. And if you're not using it, then you're never going to get better. We have to take knowledge and transfer it into behavior. And that's where finding the in-moment opportunities are important. So you've done this a few times. You've talked about it. You've found opportunities in the moment to break a disagreement, to ask someone to share state more regularly, to help someone who's confused realize that asking for help can actually be a point of strength. Then come back to it later. In a one-on-one, in a team meeting, you're going to say, hey, that MRI thing I introduced a few weeks ago, how does that work? How do you feel? Silly? Is it working for you? Not working for you? Are we doing it wrong? Let's talk about it. Because frankly, even if everybody thinks it's silly and nobody thinks it's valuable, you've now created a powerful forum to have a conversation about how important it is that we treat each other respectfully. And even if they all look at asking for help as sort of dorky, you've created an environment where it's now safe and okay to ask for help, even if they feel silly. Far better to feel silly asking for help than to feel like you're weak. Important things to remember. True with everything we do, but especially when we're teaching new soft skills. No one's going to get it right the first time. You're not going to get it right the first time. You got to play with it. And remember, getting it wrong is an important part of learning how to get it right. So it's not about good or bad. It's just about exercise in the discipline of I'm going to use these approaches to try to improve things. Okay. We've introduced these tools over time, slowly, to a whole group of people. And we're sitting back and we're watching and we're observing. And we're realizing that some of them just thought it was silly. Others actually grabbed hold, maybe not of all of them, but even of one of them and said, wow, that's really beneficial, that's really helpful. I'm seeing how that can help me be better. That's useful. You're looking as a leader for the people who embrace, if not the actual tool, then the spirit behind it. The willingness to say, some of these soft things are important and I want to do better. Because that's a good sign. It's not about them doing them right. It's just about them trying. Because someone who's willing to try is someone who's going to get it right eventually, as opposed to the person who isn't even trying. But we're not done yet. We got to do the trait checks first. It's like a savings throw. I'm a D&D second edition kind of guy, and I'm okay with that. Even if all my students and employees have made fun of me for not being in a 3.5 or 4.0 or, God forbid, 5. All right, so this is the stuff you don't tell your teams. Why? Because you're going to do some stat checks, and if you tell them ahead of time what you're doing, the results might be a little wonky. Here's the stat checks you're going to do. You're going to check for these things. On their goal motivation, you're going to ask yourself, are they someone who wants to be a learner, or are they someone who wants to be an expert? It's a little weird putting those on opposite ends, but stay with me for a moment. The theory shows that the person who wants to be an expert is looking for a level of mastery to the point at which they have this great feeling and others around them share and they get accolades for it. But they're also the kind of person to tend to shy away from opportunities that disprove their mastery. The expert is the one who doesn't take challenging assignments because I'm looking for things that only rebuff and support the idea that I'm an expert. Whereas the learner is the one who's likely to ask for challenges of things they don't know how to do because they inherently strive to learn new things all the time. It's not about not being an expert at what they learn. It's about never being satisfied and always wanting to learn more. So ask yourself, for people on your team, how many of them see learning as a closed loop? Some point I will get there and I will be the expert and then I can stop. Versus how many of them see learning as something that's going to continue forever? Next question. You're looking for their power motive. Are they organized around power as a good force for the team or the product? Or are they looking for power as a source for them? If they're selfish, if it's all about them, if they're heads down, not really caring what else is going on around them, quick to complain when dependencies slow them down, but not quick to lend a hand when something isn't directly about them, then you've got someone who's very focused on self. Frankly, some of the best programmers and artists and designers I've worked on were very focused on self. But that doesn't mean I need to promote them to a lead. Self or team? Think about that. The last check you're going to do. You want to ask yourself, is this person always the victim? Or is this person a protagonist in their own story? When something bad happens, does this person find reason to find external validation, external cause? Well, it's because the IT guy did this wrong. It's because the build guy did that wrong. It's because the artist didn't give it to me in the right format. It's never them. Even good people fall into this. Or are they willing to say, yeah, it was disappointing that I didn't realize that the artist gave it to me in a format that was going to break my build. But you know what? That was my responsibility to check. Each of these ideas is actually something in the study of management we would express this way. We would express that they have a learning goal orientation, that they have a socialized power motive, as opposed to an individualized power motive, and that they have an internal locus of control. I don't expect you to care about those terms, other than to say these questions don't just pop out of thin air. There's lots of really good leadership and management theory and research behind the power of these attributes. Any one of them can be enough, but in my opinion, when you find the people on your team that best embody each of them, you've really got just an incredible amount of potential, just waiting for you to craft that into something greater. Okay, so you do get to tell your teams that you're going to do these things. Because frankly, even when you tell a team, I'm going to be deciding whether I think you're a learner or an expert, people might fake it, but nobody can fake it very long. This is not stuff you're going to get from their voice. This is stuff you're going to get from their behavior. And behaviors are hard to change in the long term. So for those of you that are worried, because I do believe leaders can be made and are not merely born, it is possible to take someone who has a power motive and who has an expert goal orientation, who has an external locus of control. It's possible for someone like that to become a leader. But I would say that that is a whole separate topic because it is a different path to take. Possible, but difficult. The hint I'll give you, though, is the people who tend to make that transition, go from an external locus of control to an internal locus of control, are the ones who tend to have survived through great adversity. And one of the things that leadership theory tells us, and maybe your personal experience tells you, is that great leaders are forged through great adversity. So it's possible, but for the sake of this talk, I think you're going to be able to find people in your organization who already come to you with the traits that are going to make them a great leader. All right. So we've got these tools. Ask for help. Do it, say it, hold yourself accountable, and the most respectful interpretation. And we've done some trait checks. We've watched our team enough to understand that we're looking for people who are learners, and they're protagonists, and they have a team orientation. Now we've got a pool of candidates. Now we've got a group of people that we're going to be able to focus efforts on for the next step. What's the next step? On-the-job training. We've got a smaller number group of people, and that's good because it turns out the opportunities to do this well are fewer and far between. So now that we've identified who the best candidates are, let's talk about on-the-job training. Okay, because I'm a framework kind of guy, I'm going to talk about a couple more tools that I want to teach these folks. And then we're going to talk about appropriate challenges. If people are forged through adversity, we have to provide reason for adversity. And I'll talk about how important mentoring is. All right, first tool. So you got a team and you need them to do a thing. Hopefully you've read enough and you've seen enough to know that it's not just give orders. It's not just yelling and screaming and telling people what to do all the time. I mean, many of our parents and grandparents grew up in a world where that was sort of the status quo. Not only is the world changed, but we're in a very special industry. We're in an industry that's particularly not tolerant of that sort of behavior. So you're not supposed to give orders, but I'm also not supposed to be unclear. So it's like the ambiguity, that's tough. So tell a new lead, direct your team, but don't give orders and don't be unclear, and now you've left them sort of wondering what the heck they're supposed to do, as was discussed in the talk yesterday. So I'm going to talk about a framework that I've used for many years that I think addresses this. It's a framework that helps people understand how to give effective direction. It's called the ADR Equation. It's not actually an equation, it's just ADR. But here's what it means. The ADR equation says we have an action that leads to a deliverable that leads to a result. And your job as leadership is to articulate a result in such a way that the person or team discovers the deliverable and the action. We do not simply give orders which are describing actions. And frankly, we should not even generally prescribe the deliverable. We should articulate the result. Here's a few things about this tool. It works at a lot of different scales. So while some of you may be thinking very meta with it, some of you are thinking very micro with it, and the answer is all of that works. Your job is to scale it appropriately. Your job is to ensure that the scale is appropriate for the person and the task. You've got to ensure that the result is something that the person can grasp. So if I say to one of my junior programmers, I need you to increase the percentage return on the investments I have outside of the country by 3%, they go, what? They have no idea how that manifests. But if I can articulate that as a result that says, if you can drive an increased retention on this screen, then you'll have met the goal I need. The result I need is that. You've articulated something down to a scale that the person can grasp. Not because they're not smart enough or not good enough, but because each of us operates at various levels throughout the day, and your job as leadership is to find the right level to motivate them with a result. And here's the test. If it's too obvious what the action is, you have failed. If the person is completely lost because they have no idea what action to take to accomplish the result, then you've also failed. What we're looking for are actions that are discoverable. We all work in, well, perhaps we work in environments that are very results-oriented, right? It's become vogue to say, don't worry about the game design. Don't worry about the test plan. Don't bother with documentation. We just want to spend time actually building. And that's awesome, and I have nothing against that. But overlooking the deliverable removes an important tool for us as leaders. The deliverable is a fantastic way to help someone improve even when the result isn't met. So, hey designer, the feature you designed didn't actually accomplish the business goals we had, but I'm congratulating you because the design doc was really clear, it helped the developers, the art team understood exactly what UI they needed to present for it. I need you to increase your skill set and discipline in that, because I believe doing that well will eventually lead to the business result I need. If I'm simply holding you accountable to the result, then we're asking somebody to take accountability for a result that they may not necessarily own, or take the wrong lesson. It was a fantastic design idea, but for a variety of other reasons it didn't work. You don't want the designer to take the wrong lesson. So deliverables are a great way to do that, a great way to say, good design doc, even if we miss the goal. The right result keeps us in flow. I use that term because it's an unpronounceable name of the gentleman who described it. The idea that when something, and this is what we see in gameplay, when something's too hard, I get frustrated. When it's too easy, I get bored. Flow is that space when time flies because you are having fun, your brain is engaged, and you're doing fantastic things. The right result can do that. It's particularly important to think about the ADR equation given the industry we're in, as a creative industry. While this is a framework that holds true in many, many environments, it's particularly critical here. We are fundamentally a creative effort. Fundamentally, we're about creativity, regardless of the role in the organization. And there is no faster way to destroy someone's will to be creative than to simply override them and tell them what to do, right? Make that blue. Make that pixel purple. Make the next one black. Oh my goodness! I could not imagine a more infuriating job. And yet, inadvertently, leaders in this industry are doing that to their teams all the time. The best creative leaders I know tap the creativity of their team by articulating vision, by speaking in terms of results. Here's the player experience we want, and here's some of the ways that it might manifest itself. But the details is what I count on my team to manifest. You get to coach, guide, cajole, but as long as you're clear in your integrity that you're dealing with results, you're helping your team and you're helping your product by tapping their creativity. So, leading through results with the ADR equation is one tool. The second tool is something called read the room. It's a really simple idea. It's sort of one of the most important things to key communication. How many of you know the golden rule? Lots of you. Raise your hand if you know what the platinum rule is. The platinum rule, if the golden rule says, do unto others as you would have them do to you, right? Treat everybody the way you want to be treated. Turns out, that doesn't actually represent the reality The reality is the platinum rule, which says we need to treat others how they want to be treated. The world is not just other yous with different masks on. The world does not like all the same things you like, does not think all the same things you think, does not see the world the same way you do. And while you know this, so much of our behavior just assumes that. Read the Room is about being really, really intentional about saying, you're not me. It's not about treating you this way because I want to be treated this way. It's about understanding how do you want to be treated. What do you need right now to be most successful? Because that's our job, is to ensure they're successful. We wouldn't be here without the team. If they're not successful, we fail. And giving them what you need may or may not work. You've got to give them what they need. So I'm going to introduce a framework because I'm a framework kind of guy. This is one I've used for many, many years. It's nice and simple and straightforward. It says that in any communication, you could imagine there are 4 different roles you might take. The first is the teacher. You fundamentally need to develop the skills to do something you've never done before. In which case, you need me to be a teacher. You don't need me to sit back and say, you're smart, you'll figure it out. Because that's just confining. That feels like you're letting me drown. Sometimes we all need teachers. Then there's the coach. The coach says, you've learned the fundamental skills, but I'm going to give you some practice in how to use them and how to apply them. You're getting better at using the basics. You need a coach. A step up from there is a mentor. You get the skills. You've even practiced them a bunch. But what you lack is experience. You haven't done it a huge amount yet. So you're looking for somebody who isn't trying to teach you, who isn't trying to coach you, though the word coach is appropriate, just not here. You're looking for someone who can provide what you lack, which is the experience that comes through multiple iterations. And then finally, sometimes all you need is a peer. Someone who may know no more than you do, but what they have is something important that you don't, which is perspective. When you're inside a problem, inside a team or an issue or a challenge, it's so easy to lose sight of what's up and what's down. And just having somebody from outside that situation point out what's up and what's down or ask you the right question can be so beneficial. So imagine in any communication, I've come to you with a thing and I'm trying to ensure you're successful. I first got to think about, well, what do you need here? You know way more about 3D art than I do, so you're clearly not looking for a teacher. You've done it a whole bunch, you're not looking for a coach, but you haven't actually exported your stuff into Unity before, so maybe what you're looking for is somebody to teach you that and then help you with that ramp. If I don't diagnose that situation correctly, God only knows if what I'm doing is helpful or not. So there's a bunch of other models like this. This is one I've used over the years because it's very simple, it's very straightforward. A more sophisticated, advanced one out of leadership theory is something called situational leadership. If you're at all interested, I encourage you to go look it up. All of them have the same basic concept, which is that's not you sitting in the chair, that's another person, and understanding what they need first is important before you can ensure their success. So like we said last time, you're going to model the behaviors, and you're going to do it, and you're going to say it. And when those are consistent, you rock. Teach it the same way. You present it, you look for opportunity moments, and then you find opportunities later on to summarize. How did it go? What worked? What didn't work for you? Having taught a couple of tools to this smaller group of people, not because they aren't good tools more broadly, but because this is the group of people we're focusing on most. We're again looking for people who want to utilize those tools and take this up and understand that, wow, getting better rocks. Some people will think that. Others will think it's silly. That's okay. But the ones that really understand and go with it are the ones you're looking for because those are your best candidates. Now we've got to apply challenge to the situation. Now we've got to do the on-the-job training that comes down to actually giving them something that they can fail at. So what we're looking for is what I will call Goldilocks challenges. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I'm not looking for soup that's too hot. I'm not looking for soup that's too cold. I'm looking for soup that's just right. Turns out that's harder than it sounds. But when you think about it that way, that's important. I need to give you a challenge that is just difficult enough that you're going to have to stretch to grow to do it. But not so difficult that you fail. Because here, I've taken this incredible amount of potential, and I've thrown you in a pool and said swim. Maybe I've thrown you in a pool of acid and said swim. That's not helping you. It's not helping them. Trial by fire only goes so far, but if your whole team ends up burned, you haven't done yourself any good. Find the challenge, which is just a little beyond their capacity, and give them that opportunity. It also must matter. If the challenge doesn't matter, then the whole exercise is for naught. A hard part as a leader is to say, what challenges are important? And what people do I need to grow, and how do I match those? Where can the lack of complete success be mitigated so that I can use this as an opportunity to grow somebody? Because I need both to happen. I need to grow this person, and I need this challenge overcome. But if you're too careful about the challenges you use, then you're not giving anybody something real to work with. And if you're giving them the most difficult challenges, then potentially you're putting your business at risk. So you've got to find that balance. An important thing to consider, and that'll loop back to when we talk about succession planning, is we often talk about the importance of delegation. And how, especially, hopefully if you're in this room by now, you know that you can't be successful by doing everything. You've got to find ways to delegate more successfully. When you think about delegation as a career opportunity, as a growth mechanic, as a leadership development thing, you see it a little differently. It's not merely about taking stuff off your plate you don't care about, or taking stuff off your plate that you're bored with, or taking stuff off your plate that's sort of busy work. You might actually keep more of that now, because what you want to give away are the opportunities that are really going to grow your people. So I love being involved in the architectural review, but I'm going to delegate that to one of my leads because I need to watch him go through it. I need to see him do it, and then I'm going to provide feedback and coaching to ensure that he can do it better. Not because I don't like it, but precisely because I do, I need to be conscious of delegating those things to give other people opportunities. But here's one reason why mentoring is so important. The Goldilocks challenges are hard to find. And in fact, we as humans tend to not do such a good job in judging the difficulty of a given challenge. This is not like a game design we can put on a spreadsheet. So mentors are an incredibly important part of the process because they're there to cover any gaps. I asked you to do something I thought you could handle. I didn't realize it was going to blow up in your face. Thank goodness I connected you to a strong mentor who can coach you through the process. Because instead of you now feeling overwhelmed at this challenge, and I've lost a great candidate and you've lost an opportunity, I've connected you with someone who is there to help you through that difficulty, even though I judged it perhaps wrong. Mentoring is incredibly important. You could do a whole talk on mentoring. So here's the one slide version, right? Important that the mentor is outside your local context, because part of what they offer is that different perspective. Don't underlook that. And even if you're on a small team, there's some version of local and not local that you can use. Not local is better. 2, your goal as a mentor, and when you ask someone to be a mentor, it's not about solving somebody's problems. It's about helping them find their own solutions, which often means mentors are about finding new perspectives. Mentors are about asking the questions to help someone unlock something and discover something on their own. That's difficult, which is why not everybody is meant to be a mentor. Some of us don't always have the patience. We just want to get to the point. You're probably not ready to be a mentor, or certainly not in that context. I believe for someone who's more junior, I tend to try to mentor them with someone who's of the same discipline, because it's likely that the next promotion or 2 for them is going to stay within discipline. An artist to an art lead, I probably have mentored by another artist. But at some point, I'm looking at my folks and I'm saying, now they're getting to the point where I need them to be more broad in experience. So I might take that art lead and have him mentored by a technical director, because the very fact that they're different is the value. It's not about only somebody who understands me and my world. It's about people who can bring other perspectives. And the more senior you get, the more you're going to have to be able to understand cross-discipline. Your art lead may never have a chance to go be a programmer, but if they've been mentored by a strong TD, their appreciation for that discipline grows considerably, which makes them much more valuable to me as a senior leader. Do's and don'ts: you listen and you ask. You don't solve. You don't dictate. All right, there's a whole talk in there. That's the one slide version. So, now, you've grown these people, you've given them some tools, you've given them some challenges, you've provided mentors to help them through those challenges. You're observing, and you're realizing that some of these combinations are working better than others. You also understand the weaknesses in your organization. You know, that designer of mine, since we shipped, he's been a little anxious. If he bailed tomorrow, would I be okay? Your job as leadership is to be mapping this out. And maybe you're not doing it on paper, maybe it's not formal, but it better be being done in your head. I expect all of my direct reports to have clear succession plans in place for every leader in their organization. It doesn't always mean it's pretty. Sometimes you just got to admit, and here, I'm just in trouble if somebody leaves. But now you know where your weaknesses lie. Succession planning says, identify the leads in your organization and identify what it's going to take to replace them. But there's some misconceptions. If you're looking for a perfect clone of that TD you need to replace, you're making a mistake. This is not about finding someone who can match 100% what that person does and contributes. That's not reasonable, nor is that even advisable. Because that person is a combination of experiences and expertise that is unique to them, and we don't want to duplicate it. We need to understand the parts that are required, but often that's a whole lot less than you take for granted. We want to find somebody who, say, delivers 70%, because the rest of that they're going to grow into their own and find their own value. Succession planning is not about an absolute replacement. It's about finding someone who's going to grow into the role given time. In part, because hopefully you've built your team such that the 70% of the new guy, plus the team surrounding them, is enough to have covered 90% of what the old leader was doing. You should do this analysis with every manager you have working for you and with every lead you have working for you. If you don't think this is true, you've just given yourself homework. These are the places you need to invest. Because if you're not covered, then you're putting your business at risk. And if you own your own business, hey, that's your problem. But if you, like lots of us, actually are working for somebody, it's your responsibility to take care of the business well enough that if you or any of your people disappeared, things could establish. I tell my kids, my students, it's the bus test. If you got hit by a bus tomorrow, how in trouble am I? And if that number is high, that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing. I'm a big believer that we formalize some of this to the degree of saying the art director might have 5 art leads. I like saying 1 or 2 of them is actually taking a formal number 2 role. They may not have any management responsibility above the other leads, but it's a clear delineation that when the AD is out, this is the guy who's taking over. This is the guy the AD is grooming. Maybe it's multiple people. I actually think it's awesome when it's multiple people, and when you're a large enough organization, you can afford to do that. Having successors is how I've gotten promoted. I've run multiple studios at multiple companies. I grew up quickly at Microsoft. In 14 years, I averaged 13 promotions. Couldn't do that anymore. But at the time, a large part of why I was promoted as quickly as I was because I made sure that my business was taken care of. I was given greater opportunity because me moving up was never putting the business at risk because I had made sure to find fillers, people to grow. Good news, many of those people have gone on to actually surpass me. There's a couple of them now that are far more senior than I've ever been, and I'm super, super proud to have been a part of helping them grow. But having successors made me stronger. Having successors will make you stronger if you believe that. So I'm going to close with a thing. When this talk was first proposed, this talk was all about how I'm going to help you understand the importance of a leadership culture. It's this phrase I made up. Because, you know, you put titles to things, they become real. Leadership culture is my effort to describe a situation. Hopefully some of you have been in this. Maybe some of you work in a team like this now, where everybody on the team really is pulling in the same direction. And we feel the commitment. It's visceral. That it's not about following orders. Nobody's brain is turned off just acting as a machine, doing whatever they get told. A large part of my job over the years has been turning people's brains back on because I don't need automatons. This is the kind of org where when there are gaps, everybody spots it and everybody takes responsibility. Hey, there's a gap between us. What are we going to do about it? It's very different than the org where people do this and go, woohoo, thank goodness this is not my job. This is the kind of team that you're invigorated to go work with. This is the kind of team that feels invincible. This is the kind of team people mourn leaving. This is the kind of team that you might call a gelled team if you read Dennis, or a performing team if you go by that theory. A variety of different names that describe when a team feels this way. This is a team where everybody knows they can lead from anywhere. Not because you as the boss can't, but because you as the boss have given up a huge amount of control to the organization. You've said to the organization, accomplish the goals as you see fit. Frankly, roles and responsibilities on a team like this sometimes disintegrate because they're no longer helpful. If they are not helping the team succeed, they're getting in the way. Really great teams do what it takes. So how does it connect? Well, I've been sneaky. Maybe more obvious. Yes, this is about growing leaders, because that is an important role for our business, and it is important that this industry understand that our future depends on developing future leaders. But this is also about helping you build a culture locally and then spreading of a leadership culture. Teach your team these tools. Your teams will get better. Take the people who care most about those and give them certain additional responsibilities, certain on-the-job training, and additional sets of tools to use. And you will see a shift. If you work in one of those places where people are phoning it in, this is going to do you wonders. If you don't, this stuff is still going to help you improve. I am willing to depend on that. So let's summarize and close. We started with your whole team. We're going to introduce a set of tools. We're going to do some stack checks. Did they learn? Are they team focused? Make sure they're not a victim. That's going to identify some key people who you're going to grow with. To that group, we're going to introduce a couple more tools, along with a number of challenges, supported by mentors to help them through that. That's the on-the-job training. And out of that, we're going to come down to a group of people who you can see logically how they flow into the future of your business for formal succession planning. This is the money slide. But now hopefully you understand all the parts. Leadership isn't an accident. Great teams aren't an accident. Join me. Become a game designer of a game that teaches people to build games where people build great games. It's a wonderful mouthful. But that's honestly how I think about a lot of what leadership and management is. The people are the key to this industry. The best engines in the world just sit there without somebody at the keyboard. And if the person at the keyboard just wants to follow orders, you're hiring the wrong people. The best people in the world is what's going to make the best games in the world. And you, as people who manage the people, are in a fantastic role to help that next layer grow. Do better than was done for you, perhaps. Hopefully this talk has helped. Thank you very much for your time today. We have time for a couple of questions.
Hey, thank you very much for the inspiring talk. It's been wonderful. I wanted to ask, where does perception come into leadership? Like, can you build a successful team if you don't think you're successful? I mean, I'm not talking about being delusional, right? So maybe you can share some thoughts on that.
So I think it's not about crafting a perception that isn't true. It's about ensuring that someone can get a realistic perception. So I'm a big believer in the transparency. And if that means telling bad news, I'd rather do that. because that's a setup for as things get better, they're gonna see good news. So if I'm running a business, what's most terrible is the idea that there's somewhere in the organization that is so busy managing perception, I don't actually understand how things are going. I don't know how to use that. I don't know how to make good decisions with that. I'm a much bigger believer in say it, do it, hold yourself accountable. Hey team, what are you accomplishing? And if you can't get accomplished what you said, commit to less. I need you to succeed. It's not about punishing you for bad news. It's about scoping what you're committing to something that can be good news. So yes, manage perception by setting your team up for success. And if you're in an environment that lets you do that, it isn't about creating a false impression. It's about creating as true an impression as possible, strengths and weaknesses together.
Last question.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. Thank you for the great talk. I would have one question that would elaborate a little bit on the tips for teaching that you briefly talked about, especially the one that gave an example for timeouts and how important a timeout can be once someone encounters a problem that you talked to them the other day. And my question would be, how important is it to or how do you deal with resistance within your team? You know, when it comes to a point where you feel, okay, this is exactly what we talked about, and now this is the problem we know. Time out. Think about how to apply strategy. But what if the team doesn't, you know, doesn't really see it right now?
So I'm accustomed to my teams. So the question, how do you manage when there's resistance to some of these ideas? I'm accustomed to that, because I tend to fall a little bit on the dorky side, that I get a little touchy-feely with my teams, and I talk about, let's respect each other. But the reality is, all I need is one person to connect with the idea. I don't need everybody to connect. So it's not about trying to force a perception more broadly. It's about just finding that one or two people. I'm not against coaching somebody in a one-on-one to say, hey, we're going to talk about this thing this week. I think it might really be interesting to you. Dealing with their concerns ahead of time so that when I do present it to the group, I know that they're going to be more on board. Because I believe that strong people become role models for the rest of the team. And when you are demonstrating success because you start using the MRI, even those around you who are a little wonky go, well, maybe. So I don't need everybody to like me. In fact, I'm quite comfortable with the team not liking me. But if there's one success, that's enough to spread a best practice within the team. I know I ran a little bit late. I'll stay outside if there are more questions. Check out my other GDC talks if you're interested, or my occasional blog if you want to hear more ramblings on leadership in the video game industry. I've really appreciated being here. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the show.